The Democratic Republic of Congo elections on Wednesday were plagued with delays over the opening of voting stations. Election observers found that while stations were meant to open at 6 a.m., 31% of those polls were still closed, and over 45% of voting machines experienced problems, which resulted in the elections being extended for a second day into Thursday. 5 presidential hopefuls from the opposition have since collectively called for a rerun, saying the decision by the Electoral Commission to extend the polls by a day was unconstitutional and results to electoral fraud. We now speak to international law researcher Tendai Mbanje, who has been conducting election observer missions in various parts of the continent, to give us a sense of his views. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Chaos ensued in the DR Congo, massive delays, and the opposition is not taking this matter lying down. What is your assessment of how the elections have played out in that DR Congo?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I think the situation in the DRC, the elections show that the Independent Electoral Commission, CENI, was not entirely prepared to run this election, particularly on the 20th of December, simply because the logistical challenges that the Independent Electoral Commission faced was quite unprecedented, in the sense that they should have perhaps sought some extension so that they could be able to reach out to the entire electorate timely, and the country is quite in a very volatile and fragile state. The sensitivity could have been given in terms of running this election. And this raised a lot of concerns. Opposition parties have been having lack of trust in the Commission, and this kind of logistical challenge that have been faced have kind of validated some of the mistrust that has been existing.
The country has a history of disputed elections that can often turn violent, judging from what we've seen in the past. In fact, in one incident, we also saw that a journalist was attacked, throughout the course of these elections. What leg would the opposition have to stand on as they make their call for a rerun, considering how these elections have played out?
Thanks. Generally, the opposition, you have to approach the courts. The law provides for appeals to be done at least 3 days after the announced proclamation of the presidential result. But in my view, the opposition, which should have not participated at all, because it's a trend among African opposition parties that they get into an election that they don't trust, and then later they start having these allegations of fraud and stuff. And in most cases, they don't have evidence. But in this case, I think the reasons why they should perhaps approach the courts and the evidence is quite glaring. If you look at the Senate itself being unable to deliver election material to so many parts of the country. You look at the machines themselves not working. You look at the displacement of voters, many voters not being able to exercise their votes. Millions are internally displaced. The northern part, they could not vote because of conflict. So there are many grounds where there's violation of the right to vote. There's violation of the secrets of the vote itself. You look at how the transportation of the voting material, they were transported by motorbikes. As the observers have also reported that some of the ballots were not sealed. These are kind of evidence that the observers have witnessed. So some of those things, I think it's good ground for contestation in terms of electoral dispute and evidence towards an election that is not properly run.
How much ground for contestation does the opposition have as they raise their concern about the Electoral Commission extending polls by a day? They say it's unconstitutional and that it amounts to electoral fraud. With all of the considerations that you've put forward and the concerns that came with these elections, how much leeway will the opposition have in the Electoral Commission's decision to extend the polls?
I think the decision of the Electoral Commission to extend the process was a good decision to allow many voters to exercise their right. But it's not good enough for opposition to say that that was unconstitutional, but there should be further grounds to show that the election itself was totally fraudulent. So they need more evidence, particularly from polling stations. They need evidence on the distribution. They need to show evidence in which their voters were suppressed. So to say that on the ground of the extension itself, it's not good enough to nullify an election, but they should provide more evidence as regards to why they think the election was not properly run and their voters were suppressed in this particular election. But the challenge with the Congolese opposition parties, they are divided. In this case, they should have had a consensus to field one candidate, and so that they'd be able to have proper change of government. But in this case, they're deeply divided as opposition itself to begin with. So in my view, there are higher chances that overturning this election, it requires more evidence than just the extension of the illegality around the extension of the election day. So
what is a way forward in your view? I mean, you've spoken to some of the challenges that the opposition will face in calling for a rerun. What do you think needs to happen in this regard? Because there appears to be evidence which points to some of the laws being broken. I mean, ballots coming open and not sealed is really a cause for concern. What does it say about the state of politics in the DRC and how voters are responding?
Well, I mean, the way forward for me is the first they have to approach the courts, and they need to show the evidence that this was widespread across the country. If the evidence they have is from a particular section or particular province of the country, then perhaps the court may just ask for that particular provinces or the affected areas to redo the electoral process. But it's the way forward is that they should perhaps come together, put evidence they've gathered as political parties, if they are to perhaps provide substantive evidence in regards to the fraud, if ever they have the concrete evidences, because it's not very easy to nullify an election. It has only happened twice in Africa, in Kenya and in Malawi 2019. So I do think they need to come together. They need to set their differences aside, come together and put all the necessary evidence that they have, concrete evidence. Otherwise, some of the evidence may be dismissed by the court. They are very simplistic. Yeah.
What do you think should have been done for the Senate to be better prepared to effectively handle an election of this magnitude? Because, of course, the disorganization has really resulted in the opposition crying foul.
I think Senate should have approached the Constitutional Court for extension. I think that was the most appropriate thing, and find ways to accommodate voters that have been affected. I mean, Seni, I've been looking at reports from Western media. They've been bashing Seni, but in my view, they've get some positives. Like, for example, you see that the diaspora is voting. There have been operational changes in terms of their efficiency, but these positives, they've been affected by their lack of, they should have at least asked for extension with some weeks so that they could properly distribute the election material. They could properly put all the logistical and human resource needs in place so that they could run a smooth election, considering that the election environment itself was very tense, ethnic tensions as well as conflict in general that is affecting the country.
In the East, we also understand that around 6.5 million people are displaced and as a result were unable to register or to go back home to vote. What stands out as a matter of concern in that matter, and how could preparations and considerations have been made to ensure that those people get a chance to exercise their right to vote?
I do think that the president should have, the issue about the Eastern people, they feel excluded from the economic benefits, they feel excluded from participation in as citizens and in the economic development of their country. I think the president should have find ways and solutions to accommodate the displaced people, and clearly there was lack of will in terms of that. Obviously, I'm saying the president because he has a final say in terms of the resources that has to be put to Senate so that they could have made means to accommodate those voters. They have technology. They should find ways at least to accommodate those voters, particularly those are displaced. Those internally displaced could have at least voted, given that they could have changed residency or some other means that are needed to ensure that you are properly a registered voter in the DRC. But there was lack of political will to accommodate those millions of people that are displaced. So in my view, this could escalate more ethnic tensions, given the exclusion from them from participating in their right to vote and having say in what matters for their country.
Very well. Thank you so much for that breakdown. Researcher of public and international law, Tendai Mbanje, speaking there about the DRC voting on a second day of chaotic general elections and calls by the opposition for a rerun. We'll be monitoring those developments in that country throughout the next coming days.